guys, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thank you for being with me for another YouTube question and answer video of the week. And I always say welcome to those new folks that are here, but I'm like, today I should say thank you to those of you guys that have been with me, my tried and true veterans. Those of you that are like super loyal and have been part of this community for years. Some of you guys are amazing. You engage with me on here, on the YouTube channel, as well as on my Facebook Lives and on my Instagram. And you're just like part of my family, my soul family. So I want to say thanks to you all because you deserve it. And I feel your energy all the time. I do this for you guys like it's a labor of love. It truly is, and of connection and communion with those that have a peace in my heart and connection to my soul. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that so many of you guys are present with me, are active with me in other realms and other dimensional spaces in which we participate. So hello to you there as well. All right, I'm going to get to the question. I always say, you know what, I'm not going to go into the spiel, all right? My tour schedule is on my website, themodernshaman.net. My teaching curriculum is on the website, themodernshaman.net. My schedule for getting sessions, for one-on-one sessions, if you'd like to meet with me on Skype or on the phone and work through some of your own personal issues in terms of my psychic sessions or my healing sessions, all of that is on the website, themodernshaman.net. So just go there. If you would like to connect with me in any way, shape, or form, learn from me through my courses that are online and available there, just with quick, easy access. All of that is available, themodernshaman.net. So let's get into the question of the week. It says, "Hi Rachel, I love your channel. I have been watching you for years and am so blessed by your videos every week. It's like someone asked the question for me." See, I told you guys, that was the first thing I said at the beginning of this video, is that I wanted to say thank you to those of you guys that have been with me forever. People like this that just ask the question. That gives me joy. So thanks for saying that. Okay, so it says, "I'm struggling right now. I'm struggling specifically with anger. Since this quarantine has been going on, I feel like I'm stuck with my own anger, and sometimes it feels like a cage. I've never really known what to do with my anger. I've lived a pretty good life, and in a way I feel guilty for even having anger towards others or particular situations. What is Spirit's perspective on anger? Can you give me some insight in how to deal with it best?" Yes, yes, yes. And I feel like a lot of people are going to relate to your question. And I love it, actually, the validity of it, your courage in asking the question. And I feel like so many people will be blessed by it, so thank you. Just like you said that you've been blessed by a lot of other people's questions, I feel like others will be blessed by yours as well. When I have connected with Spirit in session and channeling times about this topic, about anger in particular, one of the fascinating things that I feel like Spirit always reminds me of is that there is room for all of our emotional expressions, and there is relevancy and purpose in all of them. And when we say that particular emotions are bad, we label them as such, and we would put judgment on them, or we restrict ourselves from feeling them if we want to be a spiritual person or a high vibrational person or a good person. If we view them in that linear spectrum of emotional validity, then we neuter ourselves from the vitality, the fullness, and the growth and the healing that's available for us in the spectrum of our emotions. Spirit always says, all is well. And even with anger, like when anger's coming up and I'm dealing in a session, and I've had sessions where people are just like yelling at me. They're working through their anger. They're very angry about a certain thing, and they're expressing and expressing and expressing. And Spirit's always had such an overarching energy of just peace, of like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. You let that rage here, it's fine, it's fine. And so this overarching statement from Spirit is always, first and foremost, that all is well, even in your anger. And there is relevancy and validity to that emotion that we don't want to skip over, and we don't want to rush through. So that's the first thing that I will say, is to allow yourself the space and the non-judgmental perspective on your own anger. To not view it as a negative thing, as a bad thing, as a spiritually low vibrational thing if you're in that space. Instead, look at it as a very relevant emotion. Why is this arising for me? And open up to what Spirit may be showing you and teaching you and healing in you through that experience. And I know that I shared this in a previous video, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I talked about how this time when people are experiencing the sensation of fear, oftentimes what Spirit brings up is that it is an offering of courage that's really being given to us here when we're in a space of fear. When there is something that elicits fear as an emotional response to us, if we can lean into and grab hold of our own courage in those times, there is such growth available to us that can't come from any other experience. We have to have the elicitation of fear in order to stand in our courage, for it to be real. And the same is true when we experience anger, for us to stand in our sense of confidence, strength, and empowerment. These times of personal empowerment, of really truly taking a stance on something that means something to you, oftentimes is brought forward from the elicitation of righteous anger and saying absolutely not with such deliberate and confident action of like a no that is a no to your bones, to your core. And oftentimes this comes from the rush and the flood of the emotion that we would title or label anger. And so be aware that there are a lot of growth potentials that come from what would be deemed as a negative emotional trigger, whether it be anger or fear or something of this sort. That there is the probability for you to reach in and truly experience, in a way that you couldn't experience with any other trigger, the sense of self-empowerment, of confidence, of taking a stand in your personal perspective, in your confident sense of action that says, absolutely not, this is not okay for me. And to take a stance that would seem like it is blatant in anger, instead of it is held with such stance of confidence and force in your own sense of power and authority that it can't come from any other way. It has to come from a sharp sense of triggering what would be called anger from the human perspective. So know that there is absolute relevance for what you feel. Another point that I want to bring forward in this topic of anger is that this is a very healthy dynamic of our emotional and psychological body, right? Just like in our physical body, when a virus comes on and enters our system, our healthy working body knows to create a fever, to elicit the immune response and to strengthen our immunity. A lot of our immune cells are actually strengthened and work more efficiently through a time of heightened fever. And a virus cannot stand with higher temperatures in the body. And so just like our physical body, I'm using that as a metaphor, but it's very, very true in terms of our psychological body as well. And anger is used in the elemental of fire. It's a passion in the body. Oftentimes it does elevate the heart. It elevates our pulse. Oftentimes it elevates our temperature. People will flush red, and heat will start to come in through the body. And the elemental of fire will take charge here. And fire is alchemical in its nature. It burns and purges to create something new. It gets rid of the toxins. It clears out the debris. Just like that example that I was using about the fever in the body, the same takes place in the metaphysical realms, in the spiritual realms, when we burn out all that no longer serves us. So oftentimes when anger arises from a situation where we've been done wrong in a very deliberate action, or someone has abused us or manipulated us, or maybe it wasn't even personal, maybe it's a societal issue, right? That you see and you think this is absolutely wrong, and you have a sense of collective anger or righteous anger against something happening in society that you view as absolutely morally wrong and against your ethical standards. When these arise and a natural state of anger comes forth, we do better emotionally and psychologically to let the fever burn out, to let the anger purge through. And the way you do that is with that sense of awareness that that is happening, right? With rationality to it. When you're irrational in anger, this is when it gets abusive and when it gets oppressive to others. When you are rational and aware, self-assessing what's going on, and you have a sense of perspective on it, you can let the anger come through, and it's not targeted to any one person. It's not targeted. It's just the acknowledgement that something is wrong here. Something is not in alignment with you, and you do not agree with it. And from that space of vocalness, whether it's your own vocal stance that you're taking, you can hear the kitties are really fiery about it too. My cats are right there. When you let that rise through and you have a sense of health to your process, you are self-assessing, you are recognizing with a rational tone of your being that this is absolutely not acceptable, that this is absolutely wrong, and against your sense of ethics. And it doesn't mean that you need to go batter the person doing it or, again, abuse the system. But you take a stance in your personal sense of morality and ethics that says, no, the line is drawn in the sand here for me. This stance lets the anger ride through and moves past into a space of letting that fever burn out the things that no longer feel like they are serving you. And it kind of gets, when things burn out, what happens with the fever or with anger when it's let to go through its own righteous phase is it begins to kind of it begins to kind of create an alchemical process where the sediment, those thick stones, are shown, and everything else that is peripheral, all the things that are no longer needed, burn away. And so a lot of times the people, the places, all of the peripherals of the scenario or the situation burn away. And it's no longer about that person or that particular event, and it's about the moral of what's happening here. All of the details have been burned away, and the righteous sense of clarity comes from the purging of that anger. You gain a sense of wisdom from seeing it in a way that feels very clear of any of the sediment and the muddy debris of that irrational or that first response of triggered anger. When you let it ride through and you give firm expression to it. Now, the third point I will make with this is kind of piggybacking on that second point, and that is that you get that clarity through a sense of formal expression, a sense of letting the fever, the anger ride through the body and letting it have an appropriate response. So if there is physical energy, a lot of times the fire will dispel a literal sense of energetic charge. This is the passion in it. And so we will need to be physically active with the body to get this out. So sometimes when I have sessions where we're working through a sense of anger and getting that sacred anger work done, we may throw rocks outside. We may break rocks with a hammer. We may punch a punching bag. We may do primal screaming through the throat or through the belly in terms of the belly ache and yelling from the belly. We may do group channeling in terms of crying out, where it's more like a wail. It's an expressive energy. We may write. We may channel and write it onto the paper with large red crayons or markers or black, and just get all of the energy physically out of the body. And there's a literal discharge of energetic transference. So it's a little bit like static electricity. It's moving the energy out of the body. And in particular with sacred anger work, when we utilize other elementals that are known to absorb energies, they have a wonderful nurturing energy that comes back and nurtures the one that was experiencing the anger. So trees are absorbent, right? So writing on paper, and I have a video on the alchemy of paper. They are absorbent in nature, especially if we use lead-based pencils. Not all pencils are lead anymore. A lot of times they're graphite, but if you can find a pencil to move in that magnetic current onto the paper, it's literally pulling the energy out of the body, and you're writing with passion, so there's a lot of active, literal static discharge from the body. Or if you're doing the same thing with the rocks, if you're holding the rock, you're thinking about who it is that you're angry at, the situation that you're angry at, whatever it is, and not necessarily wanting to call them and vent to them, but you're holding and you're discharging the energy into the stone, particularly a black stone, which is known to absorb the heat, just like a black clothing would absorb sunlight. These are the components of the elementals that are there and ready to serve us when we use them for our elemental work. And they're so capable of holding emotional energy and the heat that's discharged from the body, from these highly energetically and emotionally charged events. And then we throw them and we give a sense of momentum that has a trajectory away from the body. Or you slam and you're breaking open like a geode or something like this, and you're cracking open, you're creating a sense of change, and you're visually seeing it, and the expression becomes very true in the physical realm. There's a lot of these activities that can be done for sacred anger work of moving the energy out of the body, giving full permission, not restricting or restraining the body. The last thing I would say, or last point I would make, is that we want to be sure that we give ourselves the permission to do this. If we don't, this can become highly toxic in the body, and it can create disease in the body. When we suppress our anger, it moves into depression, and this is a absorbent on the internal. We become very almost like a sponge, and becomes moldy on the inside. All that anger, all that energy becomes depressive and suppressed inside, and then it's stored there, and it starts to kind of grow like spores with mold growing throughout the body, and certain areas or organs in the body that are not moving at full capacity, that are a little bit sedimentary depending on your physical exercise or what you're eating, they become areas that are targeted by this anger being stored within the body. And so those areas are more easily affected in terms of disease or growing something negative in the form. And just like when we move things out of the body through black stones, through using elementals and minerals to absorb the body heat, or the body energy of that passion and anger, our physical body and the organs inside can do the same thing. So when we are depressive and we blame ourselves and we say shame on me and we hold this in and we move it inward, all that toxic energy, instead of having a trajectory outside, begins to develop inside. And any area where we have a weak immunity, that we haven't been taking care of ourselves and keeping our immune system flowing and healthy and vibrant, it gets targeted there and creates dis-ease within the body. So we have to be very, very aware of how we use our anger and in what ways we take that sense of self-assessment in a righteous way of being cognitive and being rational about what's going on, and then giving ourselves permission to move it away from the self, move it out of the body, and give it full expression without any sense of restriction or depressive energy or repressive energy inside. That's what I would recommend for you. And utilize the power that this gives you. A lot of times there is a strong sense of self that is developed through righteous anger, through realizing what is not okay for you. It's different for every person, but we get a very clear perspective through the voice of anger and what that voice is speaking to us. If you want to learn that lesson, I would encourage you to move it onto paper. Ask your anger, what is this telling me? What do you have to say? Why did you show up so blatantly in my face today? And see what channels out of you into a journal, what it does have to say to you. There's a lot that can be garnered from our own sense of self-awareness of what we truly feel strongly about. And the strength and power that comes from that emotion is perfect, is absolutely relevant for you when it arises. So I would encourage you to move through each one of those steps in terms of a healthy sense of what anger has come to show you and how you can use it to strengthen your sense of self. It's not projected on anyone else. It's there to teach you. So use it. Blessings. We'll be back here next week with another video.